You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 76. Today I'll be talking to Camilla DeRico. Alright, so my name is Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairdspodcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like getting early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests. You can find all the information about that at patreon.com/artaffairs. You can also connect with the show on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. Alright, so today's guest is artist Camilla DeRico. Camilla is most well known for her paintings of gorgeously colorful and vibrant feminine figures, often joined by animals. But her career has been incredibly diverse, and for the longest time, creating comics was her primary pursuit and her true love. In our chat, we talk about how she first got into comics and ultimately started publishing her own series, how gallery art eventually overtook comics as the biggest part of her practice, her upcoming solo show at Corey Helford, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Camilla DeRico. Camilla, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you on.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
All right, awesome. So let's dive into your background a little bit. And I know that you've spent a lot of your life in Vancouver, but I read that you grew up in a small country town. But your bio also refers to you as Italo-Canadian, so I wasn't 100% sure if that small country town was in Canada or if it was maybe in Italy. It doesn't actually say. So were you born in Canada?
Yeah, I was born in Ottawa. I grew up there until I was 12. And then my parents decided to move us from the capital of Canada to a tiny remote, technically called a village of Lumbee in British Columbia on the opposite side of the country, where we had like a beautiful piece of land. But if there was nobody there, like I was used to being in a cul-de-sac, surrounded by kids and family and friends. And then my parents moved us to this very remote town, but it was a complete change of pace for us, and it was absolutely stunning. We went to our elementary school. I remember showing up, and behind, like, the backdrop of the elementary school was a mountain. Wow! And I was blown away. I was as a kid, I was so excited to be there, but then as a teen, you're like, why am I in this tiny town? But the one thing my parents were amazing at was that they were very strict. Yeah, my parents are strict. They're Italian, they're immigrants. They're strict. But what they did was they created an environment of Italy inside the house. So as soon as you open the door, as soon as you close it, you're inside Italy. Like, we spoke Italian, we wrote Italian, we communicated in Italian, and we ate everything Italian. I remember my mother making what she thought was French toast. And my whole life, I thought that French toast was salty, cause she's like, you put it in bread and milk and then you fry it up, and we're like, okay, great, salt and pepper. Like, that just makes sense to an Italian. And then I remember my girlfriends being like, why are you salting your French toast? And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, put maple syrup on it. I'm like, blasphemy, so there was just really interesting, nuances growing up, with Italian immigrants, as parents. And then, stepping outside, and it's like Canada, it's very different. The two cultures are very different.
And from what I understand, food is a very serious thing in Italy. You're telling me that you're drinking a latte. They don't do that after 11. From what 11 is like the cutoff for cappuccinos or anything with milk.
Absolutely. Oh yes, yeah. My poor husband, who is a caffeeholic, and we went to Italy, and he was desperate for an Americano, he said, no, he was like a normal coffee, and they're just like espresso. And he's like, no, like more. And I'm just like, oh God, honey, you're so embarrassing. Because in Italy, you stand to have your espresso. Like they don't really eat breakfast. They sit, they have a biscotti, and then they have like an espresso, and then they stand, they drink it. They basically take shots of espresso and then they're off. And you only drink coffee at the end of a meal and like a little shot of espresso, and then that's it. But yeah, it's interesting. They're very strict about their food.
That's amazing. So, I mean, you mentioned the kind of beauty of the natural world around you. Is it something you spend a lot of time in? Did you spend a lot of time in nature? Was you kind of immersed in that?
Oh yeah. My father and my mother were so great about that when we were growing up. They would find wild blueberry patches in Ottawa. Like they would take us cross country skiing. They would take us fishing, and we would only catch these like sunfish, which I don't know if you've ever seen them. They're beautiful, but inedible. So, but they would take us around, and they were like, my father is a hunter. So he was, they bought land, and he would have one deer a year. That was it. Like the one deer. And he would take us out into this beautiful, like, fields and forests, and so even when we moved to Lumbee, which is all nature all the time, it's just something that it's a huge part of who I am, because my parents were so like diligent about it. And my mother is one of those people who will literally not hurt a fly. Like she's like, no, you don't have to kill it. Like it's alive. You shouldn't kill it just because it bothers you. And yeah, she won't kill spiders. She's like, she cries if a cat kills a bird. Like she's just amazing about that. So yeah, they taught us a lot about how to forage and just how to respect nature, which I think is something that everybody should learn,
For sure.
Yeah, we live in this beautiful pearl of a planet. We should learn about it,
Yeah. Yeah. And just recognize that we're all a part of the larger ecosystem. What kind of work did your parents do? Like, was anything creative or artistic?
Well, no. But my mother is the one who had the artistic side, but my mother was a nurse. So my mother, was like, again, that brings back the whole caring and like, the empathy for every living creature. But she was the artistic one. Yeah. Okay. Like I remember my mother helping me with school projects, and she was drawing. I'll never forget this. It was probably grade 4, and I had to do this project, and she's like, okay, let's draw huskies, like pulling a sled. And she basically drew it. And I'm like, oh my God, it blew me away, and she drew a betta fish, and I was like, whoa, like it just was unbelievable. It was amazing.
That's awesome. So was that exposure to kind of her internal creativity that got you interested in creating art, or what other things may have sparked that creativity?
Well, it's definitely part of my mother, like just drawing with me. And then, I grew up in the 80s, and of course, you know what that means, like cartoon mania. So like we're talking about He-Man, She-Ra, like like Care Bears, Rainbow Bright. So I was exposed to all these cartoons that were just colorful, psychedelic, beautiful. And I love that every time they had a lesson at the end, Do you remember like He-Man and She-Ra, you'd watch the episode, and at the very end, the one character would like be like, what did you learn today? And I'm like, this is great. So I just think, and then of course Disney really blew up in the 80s and 90s with like The Little Mermaid, and you had like Snow White and all this stuff. So I remember just being exposed to that, and it connected with me in a really visceral way that I think absolutely influenced what I wanted to do with my life.
Very cool. And from what I understand, you're also into comics and manga. Did you have like a favorite creator or favorite mangaka growing up?
Oh, you know what? Growing up, so the thing is, there weren't any anime and manga didn't really hit the scene until like the 2000s. And the one thing that did happen was anime. So we had like Sailor Moon and Astro Boy, and you had like Tekken, and that changed my entire perspective. So when I was growing up, I did read a lot of comics though. So I was very big into Top Cow. Like, I loved the Witchblade. Oh my gosh, I love the Darkness. The Darkness was like one of the most mind-bending things for me, because it was like an anti-hero that I'd never seen before, because I was used to Superman and Batman, like they're obviously good people. But then you have this mafia hitman that has the powers of hell, and he's the main character. I was like, what is happening? And like, so I was very, like Michael Turner was just one of the most amazing artists and beautiful people too. So I was really focused on that. And then, and also Humberto Ramos brought a very interesting twist to Spider-Man that I'd never seen. It was like very cartoony, very anime-ish. So I was kind of drawing that style. And then that's when the anime hit, like the anime wave hit. I remember I went to Comic-Con in 1998 with my little terrible portfolio. Oh, sorry. I went to Comic-Con with my terrible little portfolio with like Pikachu versus the Darkness and stuff. And I got hired on. And then as I got hired by this company called Committed Comics, which still exists today, I actually like work with the editor, Tom Doherty. He took a chance on me, and I really thank him for that, because I was able to work with other creators. And then as I was doing that, that's when I took basically a sabbatical for 6 months to just reinvent my style and make it more anime, because that was where my passion was. It evolved as we grow up, as we change, I was like, okay, I don't really want to do the comic book thing anymore. I really want to look into the anime and manga style. So when it was in the 2000s, I was really big into, Hatsukoi Limited was one of those. I really, very obscure things that I think people won't even know. Maybe just because I'll date myself, but I think anybody can Naruto is just one of those mangas that, I think for me was amazing. And I cried so much reading that manga. Like there was so much tragedy in that. And I think that's what I really loved about anime and manga, is that it strikes you on an emotional level. It's not just about superpowers. It's about this character struggling and their journey, and every issue they get better. And there's like a really complete story arc for them. So, and yeah, Naruto is always going to be one of my favorites.
That early 2000s was like the height of Adult Swim on Cartoon Network.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever watched that, but
I did. Oh my God, of course I did.
It's so good. So were your parents supportive of this path for you as kind of pursuing art as a profession?
Well, as any parent, they were worried, because I was doing what artists do, which is doing a lot of non-paid work. And they were always supportive. So I'll say this, they were always supportive of my artistic skill and what I want to do. They were like, you want to be an animator? We'll pay for school. So I did animation, but I was very bad at it. And I realized that I didn't like the technical side of it. I wanted to be more creative. Whereas like animation is very like, draw this 100 times, but like slightly different. I'm like, that's just not for me. So I switched, careers, and my parents were like, well, what are you going to do now? And I'm like, well, I think I really want to do comic books. So they were supportive. They're like, okay, we'll take you to Comic-Con, which they did. And, my father like made me talk to every editor he could find. He's like, get in those portfolio lines. So they were really supportive. But then as the years went by, I was still not being paid, even though I was doing all this work, and they could see me not struggling, but just trying my best. And they were worried. But then eventually, like, I was like, you know what? I'm going to have a backup plan, because yes, you're right, I'm not being paid. So that's when I moved to Vancouver, and I went to Capilano College, which is now Capilano University, to get a degree in design. So illustration and design, so that I could actually become an illustrator and do cover, make my way in that world. And by the time that I actually graduated, that's when I was starting to get paid for comics, because I still was doing comics while I was in school. I was like, I'm not giving up. It's like a dog with a bone. So my parents were very supportive, but they were worried. And now they're like ridiculously proud of me and just like
Amazing.
So happy. Yeah.
That's so cool that your father was like, pushing you around Comic-Con, having you talk to all these people.
Yeah. Oh my God, it was so embarrassing. I still remember Joshua Dysart was one of my very first comic book friends. And he was sitting there at his booth, and my father is like, I found this guy, talk to him, he's a writer. And I'm like, oh God. And Joshua still remembers that interaction. Like, we're still
Amazing.
friends. We see each other every year at San Diego. And I'm just like, yep. Oh my gosh, my father.
So your art school, going into Cap U was a backup plan. It sounds like it was like, if the comic stuff doesn't work out, I at least have something that could pay my bills.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? It ended up really helping my style. It helped me understand layouts and like where the eye focuses. And it was all stuff because there's no school for comic books,
Right.
And you can look at a comic, but sometimes if you don't have the language, you don't understand why one page works and like why one doesn't, like why does this comic book look so good? And then this one, I don't understand what's going on. So it actually helped round me out as an artist. And even though I'm not a designer, I still bring that influence with my branding, into my paintings and all of that stuff. Like I learned a lot of techniques in school too, which helped me become a painter.
And you mentioned that that first kind of experience creating comics with Committed Comics. I think that was back in like 2001, 2000 timeframe. Not long after that, you created your first creator-owned manga series, Burn, I believe.
I did, yes.
QEW Publishing, and then later by Arcana Studios.
Yeah.
So I guess what attracted you to that kind of creator-owned side of the comic, I guess, scene, so to speak? Is that just what you enjoyed personally, and that's kind of what you gravitated towards?
Well, working for an independent like Committed Comics, they were very focused on, creator-owned titles. So they wanted to create something that was new in the world of comics. And so when Tom was like, I guess Tom didn't help me create Burn, but he was a strong influence in being like, okay, think about what you want to bring to the table. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of creator-owned anime style. Like I wanted to be very manga, black and white. I didn't want it to be colored, and it wasn't. And Burn was supposed to be my Naruto, where you take this character, this young boy, and you basically beat the hell out of him and then rebuild him into a person. And unfortunately, I didn't get to continue the series. I got the first basically graphic novel, the first manga done. And then I wanted to continue, but at that time there were issues and I was like, okay, I'll move on. But that was a really amazing experience, and getting to work with a writer, Scott Sanders, who I still to this day am friends with. And I still go see him and his family in Seattle. It's just, you just form these bonds, and you get to I think you also learn how to collaborate. When you're working for somebody else's project, you're just like, okay, I'm going to do exactly what you want. But then when you're working on something that's yours, you learn how to express yourself, how to actually talk to somebody and listen to them, which is very difficult for people, I think, nowadays to take, they were like, oh, you're criticizing me. It's like, actually, it's a critique. I'm just, I just want to give you what I think would work well. So that was a really amazing experience. And I'm very thankful to Scott for everything that he did on that book. Very
cool. And then from there, you graduated to even self-publishing. So not just creating the story, but also publishing with Tampopo, which, for listeners that may not have encountered that series before, it sort of reinterprets or reimagines classic literary tales. And I believe and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the original intent for that release plan was for it to be 10 chapters. But I don't know if all 10 chapters come out. From what I could tell, you got to 3 and then collected it, and then there was a volume 2, but I think volume 2 is really 6, 7, and 8 of the chapters. So help me understand, is there still more to come is what I'm getting at.
Yes, this is the thing. I know Tampopo is my passion project. And of course, when it's a passion project, you're not getting paid. So so Tampopo, I originally released it as individual chapters. And then I ended up working with Boom Studios, who took on the publishing. And they're like, well, why don't we just create it into hardcover graphic novels? So that's when 7, 8, and 9 were collected into the second hardcover edition of the series. And as I was working with on Tampopo 3, which I still am working on, oh my gosh, it's been years, other things were popping up and I had to make some decisions. It's like, what do I work on? Things that, because when you're creating your own graphic novel, and I was doing everything, I was doing all the writing, I was doing all the drawing, all of the coloring, all the lettering, everything. It's a massive amount of work. And even though like my sister Adapia was helping with the writing, like she would help, well, why don't we do this with the story? And I'm like, okay, yeah, we could try that. But like, it's a lot of work to read through like so much literature. I went through Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I went through like Faust, the Iliad, which is it's a big read.
Yeah.
It's a huge read. And I'm like, and sometimes I'll read these masterpieces and I'm like, okay, it actually doesn't fit what I want. And yeah, so that particular series is a absolutely passion project. I love literature, and it was inspired by this portrayal of Faust that I saw in Vancouver at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre, where the characters were all dressed in period pieces, but the sets were done in a modern, twisted way, and I'm just like, for me, that was a huge inspiration, because I thought, well, you can actually take something classic and then reimagine it without betraying the source material. And so that's what I wanted to do with Tampopo. And I do want to release, I do have 2 more graphic novels that I want to release. And, I was telling my husband, I literally was just saying how I'm going to slow down so that I have more time for these projects, because I do have also like Helmet Girls is another graphic novel that I want to release. And, you just find yourself, life kind of like sweeps you up and takes you off in these different directions. Like I didn't intend to be a painter, right. And yet that takes up most of my time now.
So what was that? I mean, self-publishing is like a whole other level than just creating the story or doing the art. How did you learn to even do that? I mean, just how to go about publishing your own comic, and especially when it was just you before Boom stepped in. How did you learn those things?
Well, I did take a lot of help from my sister, who she's like, okay, we're gonna find some printers. I was in touch with a local printer in Vancouver who did do some of the very, very first Tampopos, which were so expensive. Because like if you're not printing like 1,000 of these things, like they cost so much. And I think a lot of times consumers don't understand the cost involved with small runs or with self-publishing. So that's why when you support somebody doing their self-published, it's like the price tag is 3 times as much as a regular comic, but you don't understand that that's what is necessary, because you can't order 5,000. Where are you going to put those? Sleep on them? Like, I don't have distribution. I don't know. So, but my sister did help me a lot with the self-publishing, and we ended up finding a really great printer. And yeah, I was able to produce a very, very beautiful little booklet that had like a soft, silky cover, which is like everything for me.
Nice. And so with all of these projects going on, how did you ultimately have time to explore your painting craft and kind of get into painting and make an entrance into that side of your art craft?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I was so hyper-focused on comics. Like that was it for me. And so what happened was, while I was in school at CapU, during lunch breaks, like, by the way, I'm going to preface this with, I was very antisocial. Like I had no friends. No boyfriends or anything of the sort. I was like, I'll have a social life when I've made it. So during my lunch hours, I would work on other projects, and these were paid projects. So I would do cover work. I was working on Burn at the time. And then I was also working on for like a series of snowboards. And so then I had all this snowboard art. I had drawn these ninja girls, and they sent me snowboards, like physical snowboards. And I lived in a 400 square foot apartment. They sent me 8 of these things. And I'm like, oh my God, what do I do with these? So I went to a mall in Vancouver, and I happened to see there was a gallery. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they're the Aiden Gallery. What's this? And inside was a plethora of incredible art. It was like my style. It was just like the first time I'd ever seen art displayed in a gallery setting. Cause I was used to like the Vancouver Art Gallery, where it's like, modern art, there's like obviously Picasso's, all those beautiful paintings. And so this for me was like an interesting experience to see this kind of cartoonish pop surrealist art. And I tried to offload my my snowboards. I was like, "Hey, I've got some snowboards. You want to sell them during your snowboard show?" He's like, "No." He's
Shucks.
like, I'm like, "Damn it." He's like, "But what did you do with the originals?" And I'm like, "You mean the drawings?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, I don't know. They're in like," he's like, "You want to sell those?" And so it comes from a very interesting perspective. As a comic book artist, for me, the original art was meaningless. You know, it was the finished product that actually had value. It was like, that was what you're supposed to be proud of. You're like, "Look, I got it published. Like, this is it. Like, it's, you know, there's staples. It's done." And so I didn't even give any of my original art like a second thought. And so when this gallery, you know, Ken Lum at the Aiden was like, "I would love to, like, let's frame it and let's sell it." And so they did. They sold the drawings sold before the opening to a man from Los Angeles who saw my potential. And between Ken Lum and, you know, David from Los Angeles, I was doing shows with Ken. And then I was also being introduced into the world of pop surrealism in LA. And so David was introducing me to these galleries, and I started transferring my art from paper to canvas, which is something that I was never really encouraged to do in school. You know, like I've had teachers that were very positive, but then I also had negative experiences where they're like, "Yeah, you're not really good at painting." And I'm like, "Well, screw it. I'm not even going to be a painter. It doesn't matter. I'm a comic book artist and I'm going to show you all." And then Ken was like, you should paint on, you know, on canvas." And I'm like, "All right, okay, I'm going to give it a shot." And I did. And I felt such a different experience doing that. Like, as an artist, I got to focus on one image that told a story without words. And that is such a unique thing to do, because people really can't tell what you're doing. They have to interpret what you're doing. And I really loved that. And so I kind of fell in love with painting. And then my sister became involved, after that, after I basically just couldn't handle everything on my own. And she was taking over like the business side of it and everything. And we ended up, going solo, in Los Angeles and, developing long-term relationships with galleries. And it's kind of like my world now, where I'm painting all these crazy things and expressing very emotional things, which I couldn't do with comic books.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the skill of being able to tell a story through an image. Do you feel that storytelling component of your work as a comic artist carried over or enabled you in some way later as a fine artist?
Oh, absolutely. I think one comic or one manga that I particularly fell in love with was Blame. And it was so much of that had no words. Like, the character is just moving through the entire book without saying anything to anybody. And the artist was able to capture such rich emotions through the character's expression that I thought, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. And because of my background of being such a child of nature, you know, I thought this is my story. This is what I want to say without saying anything at all, is like showing people that they are part of the world, you know, and that we blend technology with the natural world. So that's when Helmet Girls was a really big thing. I was doing a lot of black and white canvas work. And then I added a lot, like I started adding animals, and then I started adding, like, then I just took away the industrial element and just had animals. And that was just, it was to me, it was very beautiful because I could express so many different ideas and people got it, you know, they were like, "Oh yeah, I see what you're doing."
Well, and they also kind of inject their own ideas too, which I think is interesting.
Absolutely.
It makes it sort of a collaboration, between the viewer and the artist. You kind of mentioned the evolution of your career, and I thought it was really interesting because, at first, in the early days, as you got started, you dreamt of being a comic artist. Like that was the top of the mountain, right? And even while you were doing other things, I saw in several older interviews that you did, you're like, comics is my heart. Like that's where my love is. And it seems like now gallery art seems to have a bigger presence in your practice. At least, obviously my perspective is admittedly skewed towards Gallerate, so maybe it's just what I see, but it feels like it has a little bit of larger presence than the comic art does. So help me understand that trajectory and how that evolution occurred over the course of your career.
So I remember specifically the turning point was when I did when Random House approached me to do my first how to draw book, and it was called Pop Manga. It was just called Pop Manga. And I was like, okay, this is everything that I've wanted to do. I want to teach other people how to draw anime and manga from a professionally, like a working, like graphic novelist perspective, because I saw a lot of the art that was out there, like the how to draw anime. And it was like, oof, like in my opinion, it was an oof moment, you know? And so then it takes a lot of time to do those kind of books. And I think, again, people don't know it takes like 2 years to do that. So that's when I had to put a pause on Tampopo, and I had to take a pause from working with other comic book projects, because I'm like, okay, this really meant a lot to me. It meant a lot that I could share my knowledge, my insider tips, like just help people who were like me, who went through school where the teachers were like, yeah, anime isn't art, you know, like you find something else. And so I wanted to do that project because of that. I wanted to help others who maybe aren't as stubborn as me, who aren't as obstinate and tell your teachers, I'll show you, you know? So I produced that book, took 2 years, and it was amazing. And then after that, Random House was just so supportive, and they were so excited. They're like, oh, let's do another project. And I'm like, well, of course, you know, they've got, again, it's like an evolution of your passions. And you're just like, okay, yeah, now I can find another way to express myself. And that's what ended up happening. And so then I started to do, I remember it was a how to paint book, and it was called Pop Painting. Cause again, there's another version of like how I went through college, and I was so disappointed with like how they were teaching me. They were trying to teach me style instead of teaching me technique, and then let my own style influence my art. So that book, and it took another 2 years to produce. So as you're like, you go through your life and you're like, oh wow, it's been 4 years and I haven't done a comic in 4 years. And then you're just like, wow. And at the time I'm doing paintings because they're in a sense like, less time consuming than a comic, and there's less moving parts, I think too, you know, like, so I remember doing those how-to books and I'm scripting Tampopo, and I've actually started thumbnailing it out. Plus I was doing all these galleries, and, you know, the galleries, they're demanding, you know, they're just like, we want 20 pieces for a solo show. And you're like, what? Like, I think 1 year I painted 70 pieces, and I'm
wow.
Like, yeah. It's so, I was so single. It hurt. Like my paintings were becoming sadder and sadder. It's like, what's going on here? I'm like, I'm very lonely. And then I ended up finding my husband, and you know, when you get in a relationship, that's when you start to like, okay, I'm going to pull back from a few things. And again, then there's this resurgence of coloring books that was something that I absolutely loved as a child. And Random House is like, would you like to do one? I'm like, yep, let's do this. And like, I think I've got 6 coloring books under my belt now. So
nice. And you mentioned that those how-to books that you created, I was going to ask you about that as someone who's kind of found their own way to success, you know, like, what do you feel your responsibility is, if any, to provide guidance to other people that might be in a similar situation?
Well, I think responsibility is an interesting word, because I don't think I feel responsible. I feel passionate. I feel a sense of kinship with other artists. And I think for me, I want to help as much as I can, because I understand the struggle, and I understand being an artist, there's a lot of self-doubt, and there is a lot of like self-abuse too, where you're just like, I'm terrible. This is crap. You're never going to be successful. You're never going to do anything with your life. Like, there is a lot of that, and every artist has gone through that. So if I could provide like a life raft, if I could provide that in this sea of doubt, which we all have, I still have it. I'm like believe me, I don't wake up and I'm like, I made it. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much to do. So I feel like just kinship, and I want to be that type of artist who won't hold back their secrets. I know that there's a lot of artists that are like that. They're like, no, I made it. You have to find your own way, versus myself. And that's okay. That's fine. I mean, like Picasso's Picasso because of, he didn't tell anybody anything. It's fine. But for me, I'm very social in that sense. And I want to create that community. I want to be part of the community. So whenever anybody, DMs me or, writes a comment, like I always respond, or, like I want to make sure that I am there for people. And I impart as much wisdom as I can in this changing landscape, like what worked for me will definitely not work for people now, because, MySpace doesn't exist.
Right.
And, but if I can help in any way, I feel like I just feel closer to the people who support me.
Well, and that's a whole other can of worms, which is the evolution of social media took place literally throughout the course of your career. You've experienced the explosion of social media. So how has that participated in how you engage with your collectors or the readers when it comes to comic books? What presence does social media have in your practice?
It's huge. As anybody knows, like social media, it's a make or break. And at the time, I've kind of so I have like a two-sided coin. On one side, it's amazing that I can connect with so many people, and I can see like what's going on in the world, and we can support each other, and like I can, like, people in Japan can see what we're doing now. That's a thing that didn't happen before. But then on the flip side, this social media has become an unstoppable algorithmic monster that is depressing the hell out of me. And like before Instagram was bought out by Meta, and before it even went to an algorithm, the chronological version of Instagram was such a pure and beautiful form of social media that should never have been tampered with, because it changed the definition of social media. It changed why we posted. It changed how we posted. And now it's this popularity contest versus in the initial stages, it was, here's what I'm doing. What do you like? Just here's what I'm doing. And people were just like, cool. Like I remember posting a video. I made this really cool iced coffee, and I'm like, I posted it. And it got like 70,000 views, hundreds of comments. And I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. I posted a video once. I got like 1.4 million views,
Wow.
This was pre-algorithm, and then, when chronological went away, all of that innocence went away with it. And so it's hard. It's struggling. It's hard to find that beauty again. And now of course you have to do reels, which it's like, okay, great. Now I have to be a videographer. Like, okay, another hat, that I wear. So it's hard to keep up with it, but I do appreciate the connectivity. I appreciate that it is teaching me how to make videos. It's teaching me that, yes, I can make time lapses. I can do cool cuts, and, I can do voiceovers, which is really neat, so that I can continue to impart that information.
Right.
I just wish that it wouldn't be so. I wish the company like Meta would just lay off trying to siphon all of the fun and money out of us.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, it's even beyond like a popularity contest, to the point where people are just becoming experts at how to game the algorithm. What tags are popular that I need to put on my posts? Like,
it's so hard. And you're just like, and again, you're like, yes, I remember Instagram before there were even hashtags. Like, that's the thing that's very frustrating, is like suddenly you have to be paying very close attention, and the algorithm changes like monthly, and then there's bots, and then there's spam, and then there's hackers, and you're just like, oh my God. But yeah, it's, oh my gosh, it is very difficult. For everybody. It's not just me, it's like everybody. Unless you're like a TikToker who's like, making TikToks about like silly things. That's pretty fun.
That is fun. I enjoy that. So it's sort of adjacent to social media, and I guess sort of its own form of social media. I know that you have a Patreon as well, and so I wanted to ask you a little bit about what your experience was with that platform. I've talked to a few artists that have Patreons, but a lot of them don't. I don't think it's like a universal thing, and I think some artists struggle with what is it that I make as an incentive. Like how do I engage in a way that makes sense on Patreon? So I guess how did you get into Patreon, and what made you think that was like a good fit for your work and your practice?
Well, I love the idea of limited editions. I love the idea of giving people like being part of a club. I love that kind of stuff. And my sister is funny because like Adipia had come up with Patreon before Patreon was a thing. She was like, yeah, you should do this like club thing where people will give you monthly like amount of money, and then you give them these like cool packages. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, I don't have time for that. Oh my God, my poor sister. She had such great ideas. And it was like, she was so far ahead of the game. But then Patreon came along, and it seemed like exactly what Adipia was saying, but in a way that I didn't have to create an entire platform, And so I was really neat. But then as you start to get, you have to do cost analysis of things. And I was realizing that I was actually making no money because the cost to produce such limited things and postage, which I am not Amazon. I have to pay for post. I have to pay for shipping. And you're suddenly like, oh no, I've made a mistake. So I ended up changing my Patreon to non-physical rewards. And that definitely affected things because people want to physically get something, if they're going to spend money. And I'm just like, okay. So again, that's one thing that you have to like keep up, and you have to like think, okay, what do people want? But then at the same time, it's really, what do I want to give people? What makes me happy? And what do I think was going to be really cool here? So what I do with my Patreon is I give them a lot of behind the scenes, like things that I don't post on social media, things that are like, hey, look at this sketch, look at this drawing, look at this, like, oh, this is a product I might be doing. Like, what do you guys think? Like giving them a lot of options to interact with me and have opinions on what I do and what I produce. And then I do have like the one thing I do have is a mystery box that I'm really excited about. So people get like really, really rare, like exclusive items in those boxes. Nice. So I really love that. And then I also published on Patreon my fan fiction. Well, there was a fan fiction, and now there's like my sexy vampire novel series, which I'm on book 3. So,
well, didn't you originally do a while back, do like Vampire Diary fan fiction? I read that.
Oh yeah, I did. Yes, of course I did. Have you watched the show? I mean, hell, it took Damon and Elena so long to get together. I was like, it's like, screw you. I'm doing this on my own. And the same thing. So the other fan fiction I did, I thought it was really good though, but it was like The Walking Dead. I was like such a Bethel fan. I'm like, Beth and Daryl, yay. And then they killed her. And I was like, you sons of bitches. So mad. So yeah, there comes another fan fiction. Nice. So, you can tell I'm a very excitable person, and I really care about my characters. So yeah, when they get done dirty, that's when I start writing a fan fiction.
So overall, what's your experience been like on Patreon? Obviously, you started out with one idea that didn't quite work out. You evolved it. Yeah. Overall, I mean, do you feel like the experience as a whole has been a positive one?
I think so. I think it's been overall very positive. It has been frustrating. And one thing is difficult is to not take it personally when people drop off, because I was like, oh no, like, why? And then I reach out to them and they're like, oh, like I lost my job, or like I'm moving, or other people are just like, they just don't have the money or the time. And even if it's like $1 a month or $3 a month, that actually does add up if you're a type of person that supports a lot of Patreons, right? Like I recently did that too, because I was like, oh my God, I support like 20 Patreons. I got to pull back. So, and then I end up putting that money to charity, because I support like a lot of charities every month. And another part of my empathetic, passionate side that my mother, instilled in me. So yeah, but I think it's very positive. I still enjoy it. I will be revamping it by the end of the year as soon as I'm done my solo show, because that is a beast. I am trying to like ride to the end.
Nice. Awesome. So let's dive into the work itself. And I know that, early on you talked about, the black and white style that you had. And one of the subjects or the subject matters that you've dealt with over the course of your career is this helmet girls concept. That's kind of been a core motif that you've worked around for a long time. So I guess what originally got you into that idea, and what got you excited about just helmets in their various forms?
Well, I think for me, so this is what happened. I was growing up in Lumbee, surrounded by nature. There's no industry whatsoever. It's like farmland. There's bears in like the cornfields I would watch. And then I moved to the city where there's like Vancouver is very green, but to me, it was an industrial wasteland. I was like, oh my God, like why? There's skyscrapers, there's all this stuff. And then living in North Van, I would take the bus and there was this crazy factory, like on the ocean, on the water side. And we'd drive by like every day going to college. And there's these huge mechanisms and these pipes and all this stuff. And it blew me away that a person could come up with all of that. Like it's still to this day, I don't know how an engine works, like blows my mind. And so then I guess the first helmet girl really was myself in this world, in this new world. And it didn't realize that until like just recently too, of course, because like I was not self-aware at the time. I was just like, cool, let's do this. And so then, putting these massive machines and gadgets and gears on like a young girl seemed impossible, but it was like, it was this cool balance where I was like, it doesn't make sense, but it works, which is what I think of technology. I'm like, I don't get it, but it works.
Were the helmets meant to be, or maybe eventually gained meaning to be symbolic in some way? Did they have some kind of a core meaning to them, or maybe over time have they developed a meaning?
They did. Yeah, absolutely. So in the beginning, it was very much like just put a bunch of metal on their heads and yeah, cool. But then I started to modify them. And one of my favorite ones is called the Life Giver. And it has a helmet, a giant helmet. And inside are butterflies. And I use the symbol of butterflies as like ideas and that she's generating this life. Like every idea we have is a new life that we're giving birth to. And so that's when I started to add more elements, like more animals started to appear with the helmets, and butterflies are a huge thing. So then they did start to have a meaning to them, and it started to become something that I was very interested to explore.
And do you feel that evolution that took place, where you started introducing new elements, you started adding animals, a lot of more vibrant colors, was that sort of an organic thing that just took place over time, or was it a conscious effort that, oh man, I really want to go in a new direction?
No, at the time it was not conscious. I just started to come up with more ideas that introduced the animals. I think the only conscious time I changed my art style and was when I did the Rainbow Children show in Brooklyn, where I decided to divert from my paintings of girls and animals and just start doing like more bizarre, like melting rainbows and type stuff that was very much more emotional versus like natural,
And so was that the point where sort of the drippy aesthetic started entering into your work, where people were melting, or the colors, the vibrant colors started to either melt, or
the girls were melting too.
Yeah. Was that the introduction of that motif?
Yes, it was. And that really came around when the galleries were a bit suffocating to me, where they were demanding too much. And then at one point, a gallery owner was like, you know what you haven't painted? A koala. They're really cute and popular. That would totally sell. And I was like, oh, I see. So the art is only about the sale. And to them, it wasn't about the significance, right? And I get it. As a gallery owner, you're like, yeah, I gotta make fat, I gotta make fat stacks, like, obviously. But for me as an artist, I was like, oh, damn, my art doesn't mean anything to them. So when Tara McPherson asked me to be part of a show in Brooklyn at her gallery, the Cotton Candy Machine, sorry. Then I was like, okay. So I asked her, what do you want me to paint? And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, like, is there, anything in particular? She's like, no, just paint whatever you want. And at the time I just kept picturing these melting rainbows, like these just girls with their eyes were closed, like they were just floating images. And I'm like, if it's okay, can I just paint something you've never seen before? She's like, yeah, just be creative, just be yourself. And so that's when I did that. I started painting. I did an entire show like that. And it was so cathartic. I was like, oh my God, wow, I felt so good. And I thought, I was terrified though. I'll be honest, I was so scared that people wouldn't like it because there were some of them didn't even have any animals or any eyes. It was just like, oh my God, I hope people don't like crucify me. And I thought to myself, and I told my husband, I'm like, if this fails, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. I'm okay to just be a comic book artist. I'm fine with that. And he's like, yeah, you don't worry, it'll be fine. And then that became incredibly popular and people were just like so excited to see something like that. And I was very moved. I felt reinvigorated. I got my inspiration back.
Amazing. I wonder if that, like, Tara's approach to that engagement just has to do with the fact that she herself is an artist. It's a gallery run by an artist rather than, so she knows that experience and kind of approaches it in that way. It's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talked a little bit about the ability to tell a story through your work. Do you consider yourself a storyteller when it comes to your gallery work? Like, are you trying to tell the story through the symbols that you use?
That's, no one's ever asked me that. But I think so. I think if you're going to put it in that term, then yes, I am. Yeah, I guess so. Especially as I've started to theme my solo shows, like this one that I have coming up in August, it's called Nurtured by Nature. And I'm specifically telling us like an overarching story that blends animals with people in a very pointed way. It's like I'm trying to show, like, for example, I'm painting this one image with a bunch of squirrels from all over the world, and a lot of these animals, people have never seen them before. Like, you just have to do yourself a favor and Google dwarf Japanese flying squirrel. It is it is an anime. It is a Pokemon. It's a Pokemon. And I'm like, how is this thing real? I'm struggling to make it as cute as the picture. It's like stupid cute. I want to punch it so fast. It's so cute. And so I want to show people that they can live without technology and they can just look to nature to be inspired and to I really do feel like we need to step away from our screens. Because if we don't, what we're going to end up doing is missing out on what is around us. And if you don't try to explore the world around you, it's going to be gone. Like, with the way that the environment is going and climate change and all this, like a lot of these animals are going to be gone. And one piece in particular is it has all endangered species that are on the brink of extinction. And it's a sad thing to Google it, animals on, right, about to go extinct. And you're like, oh my God, that list is long. So I know it's very sad. And it made me cry. So my show is meant to just really open people up to the natural world and just become a part of it again.
And do the animals that you often include, do they symbolize certain things within the work? Like in a recurring way where, hey, a cat usually means this or a bee usually means this. Do they have, is it sort of a visual language that you have with the animals?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I remember painting like a lovebird, it's 100% about true love, mates for life, and the other, like, butterflies for me are about adventure, traveling. It's also about community because butterflies, they are, especially monarchs, which again are endangered. They create these communities. They actually pollinate the entire world. Yes, every animal does have a symbol for me. And previous to this show, I would inject that type of storytelling where I would be like, okay, I'm going to use specifically this animal, like, or an octopus means intelligence or something. This show doesn't do that. This show is specifically only about the different types of animals. And it's not, in that sense, it's not a visual puzzle anymore. It's just about like, this is what's out there. Look at what we have and how we could lose it. So
yeah. So how do you usually arrive at your ideas for new works or new bodies of work? Do you have like a daily sketchbook routine? Do you have like brainstorming activities that you do?
I used to have a lot of sketchbooks, and now I just don't anymore. I think my sketchbook, well, I do. No, that's not fair. I do have a sketchbook where I like jot down tons of ideas, and I'll just throw down any idea that I have. And as I do that, I'm just purging. I'm purging all of these ideas and these visual concepts. And then when I start to look at them, I'm like, okay, this makes sense if I do this. And then I start to evolve it, and I start to like, make it into it like a theme with this particular solo show. And the one I did, that was called, Sky. That one so Sky happened in 2020, and that one I was very specific where I was fighting or was clapping back against like racism and marginalization, because it was so hard to live. Like, we all lived through it. We all lived through like the resurgence of Nazis, which was like, what the, like,
right.
Haven't we gone through this? Don't we know that if you're a Nazi, you're a bad person?
Yeah.
Like, come on,
That still hasn't completely died back down.
My God. Yes.
Crazy.
And I think about pop culture because I just live in my own movie, but I'm just like, if Indiana Jones doesn't like Nazis,
right.
like, like, just imagine if Indiana Jones met you and you're like, I'm a Nazi, he'd punch you in the face.
Right. So, punch a Nazi.
Yeah. Just think of your life in terms of like, if I met Indiana Jones, would he punch me in the face? If you say yes, yeah, you're a Nazi.
Maybe you're a bad person.
Maybe you're a bad person. So that show, I wanted to show the diversity of humanity. So I painted a girl with like vitiligo. I painted girls that were blind, deaf, mute. I painted girls that were, I painted boys too. Not to say I only paint girls exclusively, but I painted like a gay couple. I painted an interracial couple. I painted like, it was just my way of bringing humanity back to that place of beauty where we're not looking at ourselves as you're different than me and I don't like it. It's like, actually, it's more beautiful when we are different. Right. It's the human rainbow. So that, and that really, it took me a while to come up with that because I was really, emotionally exhausted. I was really depressed. I didn't know what to do because sometimes you feel so, helpless or like you see these tragedies in the world and you're like, I can't stop it. Like, how do I stop it? And so then I just realized, I'm like, oh my God, I can use my art. I can actually just like do my clapback in this way and do it in a non-aggressive way, to do it in actually positive and beautiful way, which is lacking in the world. I think people can be very down, and it obviously when you turn on the news, it's never like, hey, we discovered a unicorn.
It's terrible. It's always
always terrible. It's like, oh, the last rhino died. Perfect. Like shit. So yeah, so now I've really made it very, very specifically about positivity. And that, yeah, like that's just how I want to be as a person. I want my art to help other people in that way.
And so you have these ideas for shows that you want to move forward with. Do you usually like write them down in words instead of like sketching them out, just like what the concept is?
I do. Yeah, absolutely. It's like a nice mix of words and then like little tiny scribbles.
Okay. And at what point in the concept, kind of conception phase does like colors actually start playing into things? Because ever since you added colors to your work, they've seemed to have become a central part of your practice. Does that kind of come in the early stages of the concept, or does it come later as you're painting it?
I think it's a mix. I think there's a time, sometimes I'll come up with an idea and I'm just like, oh, what the heck is that going to look like in color? I'm like, oh, Jesus. But then other times where I paint the main characters or whatever, the background is all grayscale. And then I add in the pop of color, then that's very intentional. And I can see that before I actually put it to canvas. There are definitely sometimes like I started this painting of the squirrels, like the girl with the squirrels. And I'm like, oh, what's her hair going to look like? I'm like, oh God, what's the background going to look like? Because suddenly it was just like, I just have all these animals that have their own unique coloring. So I'm not influencing the colors of the animals, but then I have to be like, I have to think like, okay, how do I make this all blend together and look a specific way? So, but there was another time I did this series called The Spectrum Girls. And as an artist, I wanted to explore what color means to people, because some of my work was black and white with just color. And then I'm like, okay, so people are reacting to it that way. What if I painted really creepy stuff, but in pink? Are the people going to notice? And they didn't. Like, so this girl, Rosea, she's got a flamingo, but then she also has a cricket. She's got a praying mantis. She's got a moth, all these creepy things. And they're just like, this is so pretty. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I get,
So it's like a psychological experiment to see what people respond to.
Definitely.
That's amazing. So like, as you want to, move forward with one of these concepts and starting to crystallize in your head, how do you develop the composition? Do you typically do out like a really refined ink drawing before you jump into painting, or you just jump right into the painting?
I just jump right in. I used to do that where I would put a lot of time and effort into the sketch. And then what would inevitably happen is that the sketch would not, or the painting would not look like the sketch. And then I get married to what I've drawn and it's not, actualizing on the canvas. And I'm like getting frustrated. So I think now the less detail I put in the sketch, the more energy and I can just let the painting breathe, and just like let it develop on its own.
And are you ever surprised by the direction a painting goes? Like, does it deviate very far from the original idea?
Oh God, yes. Oh, it's so frustrating sometimes when you're like I want it to look like this. And then you're like, oh, what's happening? Like it happens all the time. I'm like, this girl doesn't look anything like, her expression is different. And I think that happens because I might be going through something on my own and I don't know. And my subconscious is just putting it out there. Sometimes I want to do a very happy girl and then she's like a little morose. I'm like, this is what's happening. Like, did I just watch Breaking Bad again? And then that's what's, it's coming through. So it's, and I've learned just to let the paintings, evolve on their own. To me, they are alive and I don't, edit them anymore,
Nice. And as far as mediums you use, in the early days of your painting career, I believe you used acrylic, but now you've obviously shifted to oil. What motivated that change of medium?
So when I was in college, I learned the basics. I learned how to use traditional oils, acrylics, gouache. And I didn't like using the oils because they were very toxic. They were just really very smelly. And I, again, at the time, I lived in an apartment, one bedroom apartment with another girl. And I was living in the living room. This is how poor I was. I struggled. We struggle, like
Sure.
A starving artist. It was so true. So I couldn't use oils because it would just ruin my friendship. So then at the time I was living in this one bedroom apartment with Claudia. I worked for Opus Art Supplies because I realized that, the not getting paid thing is really, it's not sustainable. I had $13 in my bank account. I'm like, oh my God. So I ended up working for this art supply company and they taught me how to use water soluble oils. And that was something I'd never heard of. And a lot of people to this day still don't know what a water soluble oil is. And it is an oil paint that has a chemical added to it so that it blends it. It allows it to blend with water, which then makes it non-toxic. Which, I mean, don't eat it. It's not like you should eat it or anything, but it's like a more environmentally friendly alternative. But you still get those beautiful oil like the blendability, you get like those intense colors, and you could do impastos, you could do washes. It's amazing. And so I started to use this product while I was at Opus, and I fell in love with it, and it revolutionized how I painted. And then at the time as well, they had wood canvases, and I'm like, what's that? Well, let's try that too. And so I tried all these different things, and I'm like, wow, this is just, and I ended up finding my bliss, which was oil, like these duo oils from Holbein on wood. And I'm like, this is it. I'm so happy doing this. So
how fortuitous was it that you were working at an art supply store that lets you like explore these different things?
I know, right? I remember this particular time because I had applied to Starbucks because I love coffee, and I'm like, oh, I could work at Starbucks in Gastown, which in Vancouver is such a cool area. And I remember having an interview with the manager, and she's like, what do you want to do with your life? I'm like, I'm an artist, and I told her that I also applied for Opus, and she's like, you know what, I want to hire you, but I'm not. Because you need to live in a world where like of your like, your chosen profession. She's like, she's like, yeah, you were a barista before. I'm sure you'll be a great barista, but if you really want to be an artist, you should surround yourself with art supplies. And I was so thankful to this manager. And she was just like, yeah. So she's like, if you don't get hired there, obviously I'll hire you though. So I was like, okay, good. But I had a backup. But yeah, so I ended up working.
Starbucks manager.
Right? Oh my God, thank you so much. Yeah, who knows what would have happened? I'd probably still be working in acrylics.
Are there other mediums that you'd like to explore someday?
I've been given a lot of supplies from people. I think my time of experimentation is a little over. I think for me, the most I've experimented with is like fluid acrylics, and then the iridescent, which are so pretty. Oh my God, I love them. But I think I'm really happy with the water soluble oils. And then I do add in the elements of like liquid acrylics, fluid acrylics, and then these iridescents. I think that's pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, if they come up with another insane product, then yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, I can't say no.
So shifting gears a little bit before we dive into your new show a little bit more, I want to talk to you a bit about your experience boothing at conventions. We talked to a little bit about, before we started recording, just how much you used to do versus how you do now. Yeah. So it seems like, just outside looking in, that you do these a lot, or over the course of your career, you've done them a lot. How do you feel about, I guess, boothing at a convention in that way, participating in conventions? Is it something you really thrive, or is it like exhausting?
Oh my God, it's so tiring. It's a little bit of both. So I've been talking to people at shows, and I'm like, we should do a reality show behind the scenes, behind the booth, and it shows and the struggle to set up a booth, and like the hellscape that is. Like, I'm not kidding. Because yes, once it's all set up, it's freaking awesome. It's so great. But like, I've literally gone to a convention, Emerald City Comic Con. Yeah, I'm going to blast them out on this because it was terrible. It was like last year. No, so not the last year. I showed up 3 days before the show, about like, I'm ready to set up. And they're just like, we can't find your booth. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we sold your booth to someone else. I'm like, what? What do you mean? I'm like, but you had my payment. They're like, yeah, but we just didn't take it. I'm like, cool. So what does that mean? And yeah, it was this like insane like rush to get them to give me a booth. Crazy. So it was crazy. The guy, I have to give him props. So he did get me this amazing 10 by 20, and I had only paid for 10 by 10. So I'm like, thank you. And it was amazing. It was great. But like, that's the kind of stuff that happens where you show up, people have stolen your tables. You're like facing a toilet. You just like don't know what's happening. Like the power went out, the air con goes out, or like, it's a constant never ending juggle just to get the logistics to work. Sometimes my boxes just don't show up. I had one time at the 5 Points Festival in Brooklyn where my boxes showed up, but they were opened and half of the stuff was gone.
Oh man.
Yeah. And then I set up, and then I would go back the next morning, and there was an air conditioner leak, and it leaked all over my stuff. No. And I'm just like, oh my God. So there's that.
It's like nightmare fuel. How much planning usually goes into like one of these events? Like how much advanced planning do you have to do?
Yeah, so a lot, especially because now pared it down to like just the bigger shows. So like New York Comic Con, San Diego, which by the way, New York still hasn't confirmed me. I'm so excited about that. Yeah. So, and then, but it takes, so San Diego is like a wedding. There's a lot to do. You have to like make sure everything is perfect. So I start planning San Diego at least 9 months in advance. And
that's like a couple months away, right? That's coming up.
It sure is. Yeah. So I've finally ordered all of my stuff, you've got to do a lot of things for San Diego, and they've got so many hoops you got to jump through, like apply for height variance, like how many tables, how many badges, and like, it's a whole thing. And then when you get there, then the hellscape begins.
So I mean, having done this for a number of years now, have you seen the convention scene evolve in certain ways over the years?
It's interesting. So when I did my first one in 1998, I remember specifically being like one of the only women at San Diego Comic-Con. And this one guy was like, how did you hear about it? I'm like, well, there's this thing called the internet. And I searched it. Like it was, he didn't mean to be condescending, but he was just like, how was there a girl here? Because like at the time, comics weren't meant for girls. And that's, and like there was this thing where it's like, it's just for guys. And I've always been a tomboy, like I was a massive tomboy in high school. So I'm like, didn't matter to me, like, I'm like, I like it. I like knives and I like tractors and I like comic books, but I also like pink, So, and then it's very different because at the time it was very comic book centered, and now there is this insane like media frenzy around it where like New York Comic Con had a Geico booth. Like, really? I want to buy insurance at a Comic Con? Like, and there was a lineup because they were giving away free swag. So I'm like, really, people? So I don't know.
Wow.
I've seen it change from the purist standpoint where it was like comics and variant covers and the like Mike Mignola was at his booth and stuff, like there wasn't this, it was a little more toned down, but now it's incredible because you have people of all walks of life. You have like any age person is there. You have people of all genders, of all like walks of life, like seriously. And then you see them dress up and they're just like, they're tapping into their inner nerd, which I love because nice. I'm a total nerd. And to see people doing that is just like, they're so happy. There's this like positive energy. There's just this like, I don't know. When you go to a Comic-Con and you just get excited, people are just like, they're thriving. And I love that. I really do. I love it. Even if there's a Geico booth, you're just like, ugh.
And a dripping water from the air conditioner.
I tell you.
Let's talk about your next show. You mentioned it earlier. I think you said it was called Nurtured by Nature, or is that?
Yeah.
Okay, and it's opening in late August 26th at Corey Helford. So what can you tell me about this new body of work?
So this one, it's going to be my love letter to Mother Nature. It's really taking all of like as many animals and as many different species that I can, and really embracing them, really making people see that there is so much life and we need to really preserve it. We really need to be careful. I'm very worried about the fact that we're getting a bit distracted from things that are important. I think we're forgetting that this is the only planet that sustains life that we have access to. And every patch of grass that you put cement over is a patch that's never going to come back, right? Like, unless there's an apocalypse and everything grows back over, obviously. But I really want this particular show to, marry the characters like humans with those animals, and to show certain species that nobody's ever seen. Like there's a purple squirrel. I did not know that. It's from India. It's a giant purple squirrel.
That's amazing.
And then right, so I'm trying to use color as well to make a very positive, happy situations. I want it to be very fanciful as well because it's fun. Like it's beautiful. Like there's just certain things that are I always say this, but like nature is the most incredible artist on the planet. You know, there are creatures out there that you can't imagine. There is literally a green dove, like a green dove. What? So I'm hoping to bring that whimsy and really showcase those extraordinary creatures that deserve our attention. They deserve to be seen by us, and for us to respect them, and for us to be like, okay, no, we should stop I'm not saying stop searching the galaxies, but look at what we have and look at what we could lose. And also, you should be nurtured by it. Like actually, like the title, you should take from nature what it's giving you, which is happiness, it's joy, it's beauty, it's like peace, you know. Look at what we have, and remind yourselves that you're part of this natural world, you know. Right. Like a computer isn't part of the natural world, and use it as a tool, but then go to the beach or go on a forest walk or just look at a tree and just put your phone down, you know?
Right. And so was this theme something that you developed up front and then started working within that idea, or did you just start working and then identify that theme that kind of naturally came?
It was, the theme came up first. Where I live, that's actually the tagline of the city. It's called Nanoose Bay, nurtured by nature. And I drive by it every day, you know, or not every day, but like when I drive by it, I always look at it and I feel this sense of peace living out here. And like, I have a yard. I actually have a yard, and I feel so different, and I get it. And it was like this one day I was driving by and I'm like, oh my God, I get it now. I am being nurtured by nature. What? And so I want to kind of bring that sense to other people, you know, and especially if we live in cities, like, believe me, I lived in a concrete tower for 12 years in an 800 square foot apartment that was like 2 levels, and my kitchen table was my studio, you know, like for 12 years I did that. So I get it. I get it. And now that I don't live in that concrete jungle, I feel so more at peace, and I'm hoping to impart that kind of feeling and sense to other people now. Awesome.
And do you know how many pieces they're going to be?
I'd like there to be 20, but I'm aiming for at least 15 paintings and 15 drawings. Plus, I'm doing statues. So
nice.
Yeah, that's going to be my installation piece. So my installation piece is going to be statues of animals. Very cool. I'm very excited about that.
Are you working with somebody to realize the designs, or are you sculpting them yourself?
So I've found some amazing prefabricated animals, and then I'm going to modify them. And yeah, because unfortunately, I'm not a sculptor. I wish I could be, but I'm too busy making reels. No.
right. Or figuring out the right hashtag.
The algorithm, yeah. No, but I am excited. My husband's helping me with that too. So I'm just, it's going to be really neat to see that 3-dimensional animal in this space where people can look around and just see it for the beauty that I see. You know.
Awesome. Are you planning to attend the opening?
I am, yes. And actually, this is the first time ever my entire family is coming. So my mom, my dad, my younger sister, my older sister, they're coming. And my parents have never been to one of my art. Well, no, that's not fair. My father came to one of my art shows in Rome, but they haven't been to any of my art shows in North America. So I'm very excited to have them there.
So that's going to be an extra level of kind of anxiety, I guess.
Oh God, yeah, I better bring it.
Well, no, just, showing the family around, that's a whole other layer on top of it. Is there anything else that you'd want to put on people's radars, events, print releases that you have coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few releases coming up. So I always do this June release. This time I'm calling it The Birds and the Bees. And I've got this amazing holographic print that's based on the first painting ever of Snow White that I've done. And I'm very excited about it. And so I've got this release in June 23rd. There's going to be original art. There's going to be some really cool pieces and prints. Then, of course, I do have my coloring books that are coming out. So my Best of Pop Manga coloring book, the I believe the 6th in the series, is coming out in July. So you can actually pre-order it now on my website. And then you get all these like really cool exclusives you can only get from me and not Amazon. Please support direct.
Right. So tell people where they can find you online so they can stay up with all the latest.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have like an Etsy shop. I have my main website is CamillaDorico.com, and that's where you can shop online and you can find my stuff too. So, and then also, of course, social media. I am there. I'm online.
Awesome. So last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Well, you got to interview James Jean. I mean, he's so amazing. Like, he's so talented that you almost hate him because he's so good.
Incredible. Yeah.
Oh, he's incredible. But if you're going to do anybody though, I would say one of my favorite Japanese artists is Range Murata, I think, I would say, or Terada Katsuya. He's so incredible. He's such a down-to-earth guy, or Mark Ryden. Or Arjun Kawasaki. Yeah, I'm a Libra. You can tell. I can't just pick one. So yeah, I would say all of those people.
Awesome. So Camilla, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for your time. This is really, really fun. Thanks.
All right. Awesome. So we'll cut there. What did you think?
Oh my God, that was so great. You asked a lot of questions that I haven't been asking.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Camilla. It was really interesting to talk with her about how her career has evolved over the years. When I research my guests in preparations for these talks, I generally always approach the research chronologically. It helps me to really get a sense of the journey that they've taken and the way that their practice has evolved. And in the very early stages of researching Camilla, it was super clear that comics were her everything. She lived and breathed comics, and that had always been like the mountaintop she aspired to. And then having that evolve later to include painting, and then ultimately painting superseded comics as being the biggest portion of her practice and the core of her, yearly creative pursuits. It's always interesting to observe how people's passions and interests evolve over the years. How that one thing that you felt so strongly about eventually becomes secondary to another love that's become more prominent. And it was super interesting that the catalyst for this shift in her art practice occurred in conjunction with her working on a how-to book about the very practice that it eventually pushed her away from. Almost like as part of writing that book, it made her realize that she's come to love this other thing even more. That's so interesting. Her new solo show sounds like it's going to be awesome. I love the heightened focus on nature and how it's promoting a respect and appreciation for the natural world and our place in it. The show is going to be titled Nurtured by Nature, opening on August 6th at Corey Helford Gallery in LA. And as she said, not only is she going to be in attendance, but it'll be the first time that her family's had an opportunity to experience an opening with her. So be sure to follow Camilla's and the gallery's Instagram to learn more about the show as it gets closer. So thanks again to Camilla for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. And just a reminder, one big way to help out if you're really enjoying the show would be to check out the show's Patreon. You can find all the details on patreon.com/artaffairs. And as always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairs.podcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.